amazing. What a group of wonderful people here taking time out on their Saturday afternoon when you have things to do to get together with women and male allies who we value. So Heather, Maureen, and I have been so busy getting this together with a couple of curveballs thrown our way, which is as it happens with a live event. But we pulled it off, and here we are. And we're really, really happy that you're here. So thank you. This might be the second time I'm getting emotional. And I'm not even an emotional person normally. Third, maybe even, Trish says. Yeah, good afternoon and welcome to the second annual reality-based Women Unite. We're here, we did it, and we're united. And I think that's the most important thing. Unite, celebrate, activate, repeat. And that's what we do, and we can't stop until we get it done, right? So this is why we're here. And the unity part is really important, and Trish is going to say something about it. And I'm calling out my sister, Trish Oliver, over here. My sister on the steering committee of caWsbar. Yes, clap, please. Yeah, Trish and I were there right from the beginning on Spinster. Anybody know what Spinster is? And that was a platform that was made by MK Fain, a woman-centered Twitter-like platform. And that was when Kelly J. Keane was known as Posey Parker. She was thrown off. Megan Murphy was thrown off just for saying, something like, that's him. Somebody who thought he was a woman. So they were thrown off, permanent ban. Of course, they're back, thank God. But now, that's how we met, because we said, okay, let's go over to Spinster, because we think that we're at risk as well of losing our voice here in this forum. So we ended up over there, and the inciting incident for us to find each other was a particular waxing incident that took place. I don't need to give that guy more airtime, but that was the inciting incident, as we say in screenwriting. So and we went, wow, we got it. We're some Canadian women, Trish being one of them, Sherry Ingray was another one. And we said, what are we going to do? Like, where's the organization that we can join to fight this? And we were looking to our UK sisters, and they were so far ahead of us on the issue. And we were looking around Canada, and we're like, it doesn't exist. And we said, okay, let's build it. And that was almost 6 years ago. And here we are, our second annual. So yeah, so it is very gratifying to be here. And again, thank you everyone, and thank you everybody who is tuning in from home that couldn't be here. I have to do some thank yous, and I'm really excited about our beautiful panel of amazing, strong women. On International Women's Day. I want to also do some other thank yous, so I'm going to need to put my glasses on. Our steering committee, I've already mentioned Trish, of course, the amazing Cincy Chem. Linda Blade, who is not here, she's on a whole different continent. And this is a little bittersweet because this is her turf, right? So it's too bad she can't be here, right? But we love you, Linda. I know you're watching. And Linda's done a lot. It's great to be in Alberta because Linda has made some progress here. And so this is the only, yeah, let's give it up for Alberta, right? Yeah. Of course, sitting with me here, Amy Hamm, Heather Mason, Maureen Sullivan, all on the steering committee for caWsbar and speaking tonight. So I just love all my steering committee sisters. We work together. And again, it's the unity thing. We decided right from the beginning that we would be nonpartisan. We decided that this issue was way too important to be quibbling over which team you support, which color jersey you wear. These are irrelevant. This isn't an existential threat to women, and women have to come together, right? So we decided right from the very beginning we would be nonpartisan, and we've remained so ever since, and we have achieved it. Yes. We have. And we have women from the far left and the far right working together beautifully, playing nicely, because we have a single issue. We don't let any of the wedge issues enter into our discussions with each other. And as an organization, we don't comment as an organization on those. We completely value free speech. All of our associates, we have almost 200 of them in what we call the Underground Resistance Network right across Canada. Their free speech we love, on their own feeds, in their own time, hold whatever opinion on whatever issue that you want, and we support you. But together, we have to be united. This is really important as the face to the world, that we know what we want, we're willing to work for it, and we're willing to work together for it. So I think I'd like to say that's really a point that I like to make all the time. I want to do some more thank yous. I'd like to thank our sponsors, our supporters this afternoon, the Democracy Fund. Yep. This is the second year in a row that they've supported us. So thank you to them. Women's Underground Theater. Cincy. They mounted a virtual production reading of Cyberwomb some weeks ago, and they made money for us and they donated it to the cause today. And they did an amazing job. And we have also some of our performers in the room and watching from home. I don't want to name because I'm going to miss, and that's always my fear that somebody's going to get left out. But you know who you are, and we love you, and we gave you accolades that night, right? So thank you. And Gender Dissent, also sister organization to Women's Underground Theater. Gender Dissent is putting out great content, and they're now moved, like it's all follow the money type content. It's all very factual. They're now, with Cyberwomb, they have moved into the creative space and they want to do more. So please speak with Cincy if you have an idea for an article that's factual or also a creative project, because she would love to hear from you on that, right? And also, we have the amazing Carol Bamford here from the North American Angst X Space, which has done much to promote the event today, and we thank you for that. But Carol also procured and donated the beautiful arrangements, the vases and the tulips. So thank you. You didn't want me to call you out, but I had to. You are much loved. She's a much loved X-Space voice. And also all of our volunteers to get us here today and to be here today. This takes a lot of people to put things on, working together. And so none of us gets paid. We're all volunteers. And so it's a great thing that when you give your time like this, we can make something like this happen. So I want to say thank you. Again, I'm not going to name everybody because I'm afraid of forgetting. So, but thank you to all, and you're scattered and I'm looking at you. Thank you. And next, in closing, I want to thank the Royal Calgary Hotel because we did have a curveball thrown at us, and they rushed in, and they were the white knight. What do you call a female knight? A knightess. They were white knightesses. And this is a woman-led business. The general manager is Maureen. And the catering manager is Ines, and they've both been amazing. They've been so accommodating, and they put this together in record time, like unbelievable. So we thank them very much for that. Yeah, and mostly I want to thank Heather and Maureen. Right? We are the dynamic trio. This is our second year doing this. We've learned some things along the way. Last year we had a producer putting together the live event. This year we said, let's do it. Like, I'm a producer anyway, but I not live events so much. Like I like recorded stuff and whatever. So it's live event is difficult. Like it's, but we did it. I think it's okay, right? Okay. Is it okay? Did we do an okay job? And we all have our roles to play, and we actually work really well together. And when bad things happen, we don't freak out. We just like get her done. So what more can you ask for? As a friend of mine used to say, a late friend, he'd say, if he really liked you, he'd say, I'd run the river with you, right? So think about who are the people you'd run the river with. It would be you two, for sure. So anyway, I'm now going to throw to Maureen. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. So my sister in the joyous struggle, Maureen Sullivan.
Okay, wow, I'm nervous. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. We really appreciate you all being here today with us. Some of us had a chance to meet and chat last night, and it's really been quite terrific. I have to tell you that, especially this year, an extraordinary amount of work went into this event, as Lisa alluded to. And I have once or twice asked myself and Lisa and Heather, why are we doing this? But last night, one of the women arrived when Heather and I were here, standing in the lobby chatting. I recognized her and called her name and said, hey, welcome. I'm so glad that you could make it. And she started to cry. And I got choked up myself, and it really hit me. There's so many of us that feel so isolated because we don't have people around us who will acknowledge and speak the truth. And just in that moment, Heather and I looked at each other and said, this is why we do it. So I was going to acknowledge Carol again, but Lisa did. But I still want to say thank you so much because she knows how important those flowers were. So she knocked it out of the park. Thank you, Carol. From Medicine Hat, I might add. As we did last night, I'm just going to do a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. As we did last year, my apologies, we've placed a colored dot on the bottom of your chair. At the end of the event, please have a look, and if you find one, the flower arrangement belongs to you. No flipping chairs at the break, though. Okay, so just a couple of brief notes before we get started, just housekeeping stuff. You'll see pamphlets on the table that show the timeline and the speakers, the order of the speakers. There's also paper and pens on the table to write out any questions that you'd like to ask at the Q&A later. So please have them ready when we begin for that segment. You may already know, but the washrooms are located just out these doors, down the hall to your right-hand side. Many of you I see have already found the bar. That's terrific. Just outside the door here, complimentary tea, coffee is also beside that. So get yourself sorted. I hope everybody is. And for those who purchase VIP tickets, please remain in the hall when we've finished, and we'll proceed with the speakers meet and greet. For everyone else, please feel free to grab a drink in the lounge and mix and mingle with each other. If you have a ticket for the dinner, that will start at 7 o'clock in the restaurant. Sure. And finally, before we begin, we'd like to extend a warm welcome and a very big thanks to Jennifer Johnson. I don't know. That I don't know. She is due to be here. She will be here. Okay. She will. I was talking to her and she had another meeting. She was planning to come here. Yes, that was the last I heard. So okay. We hope we'll see her. Jennifer Johnson is the MLA for, thank you. Yes. And she is an MLA in Alberta and had some issues with her MLA-ness, around the women's issues. So, right? I'm sure many of you would remember. Anyways, so when she gets here, we'll do that. Okay. And also here today is John Carpay, founder and president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. Many of you will know of their most recent case on prorogation with the decision handed down by the federal government just this past Thursday. And he'll speak a little bit about that and a few other things in a little bit. So, yes, you have one more thing you want to say.
Okay, the thing that I feared the most happened, where you don't acknowledge somebody and you leave them out. Tanya is on the steering committee with us. She is an amazing woman. She does so much. Tanya, I know you're watching. Sorry. You don't even know the chaos that's going on around here. And I scribbled down my thank yous like 20 minutes before I stepped on the stage here. So my apologies. And, we love you and we know how much you do for us. So just want to, yes, please, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. If any of you tuned into or listened back to our X Twitter space this past February 20th, you would have heard our speakers here today, including Kara, talking about how they came to learn about the issues around the loss of women's sex-based rights in Canada and the United States. I spoke broadly about where I started, but I saved the specifics for today's speech because I know how much many of you enjoy learning about the journey that brought us here. I call my journey couch turf. How did I go from scrolling my Twitter feed one morning while sitting on my couch, drinking my first of, a half a dozen cups of tea of the day, to a member of the steering committee of Canadian women's sex-based rights in just 2 years? Well, this is how. On October 12th, 2022, I read a post from the Toronto Sun about a 26-year-old man in Parry Sound, Ontario, who sexually assaulted a resident of a women's shelter after he showed up at the door and told them that he self-identified as a woman. By law, they had to let him in. Reading this was my last straw. It wasn't the first or even the 100th time reading about boundary violations, but it was, to that point anyway, the last one I was going to read and just keep scrolling. It was my line in the sand. I decided I could no longer remain a couch turf. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, not many here aren't, but TERF is an acronym for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. And that was coined by trans rights activists as a slur. I, like many other women, decided that the acronym had become so prevalent that I'd own it, whether or not any, some, or all of those words defined me. My knowledge of this issue came about during the Senate hearings on Bill C-16, which featured testimony from Megan Murphy and Jordan Peterson, warning us about the dangers of this bill that eventually became law on June 19th, 2017. The result, as we know, was the removal of women's sex-based rights in Canada. That man in Parry Sound being allowed into a women's shelter turned me into an activist. I had to speak out against this utter safeguarding failure by our elected representatives, the bureaucracies that supposedly serve them, and sadly, we as a society. Women, it was quite evident, are in danger in Canada. I sent a message to Heather Mason that day to tell her that I'd like to participate in her next Keep Prisons Single Sex, KPSS, protest. I'd seen her post on Twitter asking for volunteers, but not until I'd read about this heinous and fully preventable crime did I decide that enough was enough. I had to get up off my couch and participate. For the record, I've never protested anything before. Nothing. I'm a conservative. Since then, I've been in 4 KPSS protests where I've met women who were afraid of being recognized or even harmed, but like me, had decided that they just couldn't stay quiet any longer, knowing that the federal government was housing men in women's prisons, whether they had surgery or not. It was essential. People had to learn about this. The comments we've received from passersby who'd read our signs that said, "No males in female jails," very controversial, or "Why are there men in women's prisons?" were things like, "That's not true. Stop making things up, transphobes." Or, "Those are women, not men, bigots." The gaslighting of society on this issue is so deep. But are we surprised when our state-funded media doesn't even report on it? If it's not on CBC, did it even happen? I've participated in various other events in Ottawa and in Philadelphia with WDI USA, Kara Dansky, Lear Keith, and other very courageous women who stood out in 100-degree heat in front of the Liberty Bell to assert what a woman is, while having milkshakes thrown at us and being blasted by the sound of sirens. I even had the opportunity to protest in Belfast and Dublin, Ireland that same year. I called it my Turf Tour 2023, where I got to meet the woman who has inspired so many of us, Kelly J. Keane. It's true, she is tiny, and she is tough as nails. Her courage has called to so much more courage in places outside of England, like New Zealand, Australia, Belgium, and most recently, Brazil. And yes, of course, here in Canada too. I'll always remember the train ride up to Belfast for her Let Women Speak event, meeting other allied women by identifying what clothing or colors they were wearing. The nod to each other and "I like your scarf" was an instant connection, and the feeling of solidarity and excitement that we were doing something really important and we were doing it together was electric. I so want that for more Canadian women. Once back on home turf, I planned to do a similar protest to the one Kelly J had done at the NCAA swimming competition in Atlanta, with Will Thomas competing against women like Riley Gaines and denying her her third place finish by cheating. Also in attendance to watch that travesty live was our own coach, Linda Blade, who sat in the stands with KJK when she shouted out, "He's a man," when Thomas walked onto the deck. So on January 20th, 2024, Jennifer Ann, a caWsbar associate, and I attended the Pan Am Winter Classic Spring Meet in Toronto to see with our own eyes reports of a 51-year-old man named Nicholas Cepeda, who now goes by the name Melody Wiseheart and is currently teaching at York University in Toronto, competing and worse yet, changing with 13-year-old girls. To our surprise, but let's face it, we shouldn't have been. When we arrived, there were police on site, both inside and out, who'd escorted Cepeda into the facility. We were dumbstruck. It's really this bad. There's a man in there getting naked in a change room with young girls, and the police are here to help him do that? This cannot be real. We were enraged, but even more determined. We decided we'd yell it out, and if it meant arrest, then so be it. But when he came out in a woman's swimsuit, he was way across at the far end of the pool, and it was so noisy in the vast space with so many parents and participants that we knew we wouldn't be heard. So we thought, what else can we do? We're here. We have to do something. So we decided to wait for him where all the swimmers were supposed to exit the changing area, to confront him and ask him, why was he doing this? We waited a full hour, but he never came out. And that's because the police escorted him out another exit. We felt the day had been a bust. The only good thing was we had video of him in that pool, proof that it was actually true. Determined not to let this go, Nat, April Hutchinson, and I, all caWsbar associates, campaigned against the sponsors of the Orangeville Otters, the swim club that had allowed him to join. A couple of them dropped their sponsorship, but incredibly, most stayed. I even had one sponsor email me from a barbershop in town to tell me that I was interfering with a community that welcomed Melody. What do you say to someone who's being gaslit to that degree, that has put DEI before the safeguarding of children? I simply said, the man belongs in jail, and so do you and every one of you who've put those girls' safety at risk. For shame. His name is still posted on Meet Mobile, where we obtained the competition information. Recent photos of him aren't on the Otters Facebook page anymore, but we see he's still registered to swim. However, the last time he did, it was for a master's meet. In Canada, that's for swimmers 25 years of age and up. Maybe we did have an effect. But if he's competing against women, he's still changing with them. Another boots on the ground action occurred on December 6, 2023, when caWsbar women Jennifer Ann, Kate, Deborah, and I protested at the University of Toronto on the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence in honor of the 14 women of the Montreal Massacre at École Polytechnique. Infuriatingly, they had invited a man who thinks that being a woman is an idea in his head to speak on this most important of days across Canada for women. While we were outside in sub-zero temperatures, barred from hearing the speech, holding up signs with photos of the murdered women who'd been slaughtered for their sex, a man pretending to be a woman was inside giving a speech to people on the subject of violence that women endure in a misogynistic society. These are some of the examples of what I and other women have been able to organize and participate in because we were able to meet through caWsbar. Where would we be without it? We've also organized covert activities like overpass banner drops created by our own Esme V, also known as Liza, one of the founding members of caWsbar, who you already met, who, along with Amy Hamm, Heather Mason, Trish Oliver, and Sherry Ingray, originally foresaw the need for an underground movement of women in Canada, a safe space, for women to find each other, but not be found out. These multi-city simultaneous banner drops, get-togethers for coffee, and covert stickering with women like Shanna, Terry, Michelle, and Candace, and occasional dinners with Marlena, Christine, Tina, and others, provide a place to vent, empower, and build our community. And now, here we are, more than 5 years on, and caWsbar is evolving. We're in a new phase where, and many of you, especially those watching the live stream, will recognize my common refrain: we, the women of caWsbar, are going to need to be seen to be heard. caWsbar will always be a place for women who can't be affiliated publicly. But going forward, being a part of caWsbar will mean participating regularly in our meetings and finding ways to contribute your skills and your knowledge to help push this movement forward. Women like Tony, Tanya, Sam, and Agnes, who are writing and editing articles for Gender Dissent and briefs to the UN's Committee on the Status of Women, who are organizing with Janet and Tina and writing letters in advance of the upcoming election to MPs, MPPs, and MLAs, and sharing them with our associates to send them to their own representatives, asking them where they stand on women's sex-based rights, and of course, the repeal of Bill C-16. And the question must be asked, what will it take to not let this happen again? Not if, but once we win back our sex-based rights. We certainly can't count on the other women's organizations here who let this happen in the first place, because their funding is tied to their acquiescence. The trust for those so-called women's rights organizations is completely broken. Unlike them, we rely 100% on donations. It's no surprise that there's no government funding for orgs like ours, from this federal government especially. They're responsible for the need for caWsbar. As we all know, they legislated and continue to fund our erasure in law. With the upcoming election this year, we're now at a point in the fight where the struggle that's been a labor of love must now be an all hands on deck situation. This is a call to action. This is our chance. We must be heard, collectively, certainly, and individually, most definitely. If not us, then who? This happened under our watch when many of us weren't watching, me included. We have to fix this, and we must never let this happen again. For our future and the future of our mothers, our daughters, sisters, granddaughters, nieces, and friends, we must empower each other here today, because it's going to take far more than a handful of caWsbar women. It's going to take every one of us, men included, to speak up and to show up. Fear of violence, fear of consequences, especially after the trucker convoy, is understandable. But please know, every time I post something on X under my own name and photo, or show up to a KPSS protest, or speak on behalf of caWsbar on the Saga 960 Surrett radio show about the most recent egregious incident in Canada against women and girls, I feel the fear, and I do it anyway, because I must. We must. Besides having my children, and probably because of them, especially my daughter, getting up off the couch has been the most important choice I've ever made. Please join us, women of Canada. We need you. Thank you. Okay, I'm so glad that's over. Give me a second. Okay. I am happy to now be able to introduce our wonderful panel of speakers, starting with the lovely Drea Humphrey. Drea is the BC Bureau Chief Reporter with Rebel News. known for her fearless investigative reporting on government overreach and threats to personal liberties, including parental and real women's rights. Her confident yet empathetic approach has made her a leading independent voice in Canadian media. We've all watched her bravery in dealing with the wax my blank who's threatened her and her family. We are so impressed by and thankful for her courage in her reporting. Please give Drea a really large round of applause.
Thank you for everybody who put this together with caWsbar. You guys have worked so good at putting all of these women together for this very important fight, and you deserve another round of applause. And as Lisa said, you've brought together women and male allies from all across the political spectrum. You said far left to far right, which had me questioning, am I far right? You guys can tell me. But no, you never know. Yes, exactly. What a world, what a world. As was mentioned, my name is Drea Humphrey. I'm the BC Bureau Chief Reporter with Rebel News, and I worked very hard to get that title, mostly by being the only Rebel News reporter in BC. And I believe that I work for one of the best news organizations in the country, dare I say, the world. And the reason why I say that with confidence is because I am free to be who I am in my reports. I am free to report on issues that affect people today, so long as I am letting you know about the other side of the story to the state propagandists in mainstream media, and so long as I follow the facts where they lead me. That includes when I report on things like the importance of safe, same-sex-based rights. And it includes when I report on things that put us at risk of being demonetized and losing millions of dollars, true story, or being the recipients of bogus lawsuits or legal complaints like we face from whom I know we don't want to give too much time to, but since this is still an ongoing issue, whom, for example, we are currently facing from Jessica Simpson, who we all know better as Wax My Balls in Eve, in the activist-led BC Human Rights Tribunal that leads us to face hefty fines, not because my reports are not factual, because they are, but because Section 7(1)(b) of BC Rights Human Rights Code says that it is forbidden for publications that are likely to expose a person or group to hatred or contempt based on a protected personal characteristic. So if I report and inform the public about a predator who threatened, as we all know, immigrant women who were working as estheticians in their home, who sent sexually explicit messages to minors, who physically attacked journalists for exposing these such things, and who has personally attacked my children and home. I am at risk, but I work for a publication that allows me to still speak the truth. So since I'm as free as it gets these days in Canada to do so, I want to speak about an issue that I believe is the biggest threat to safe sex-based spaces today. And that is the fact that schools are no longer safe spaces. We all know why we came here today. We all know what a woman is. We all know that it is important to stand for safe same-sex spaces. We know that it's important to stand up for children's innocence, to protect their bodies, their mental health, and their future. But the truth is, if we don't effectively pass on the knowledge that we share in this room, everything we know can disappear very shortly in this fight if we don't focus on the children. Schools today have become a battleground for gender ideology. They are the stomping ground for it, not for means of inclusivity, but instead to change the way society views things, the way they view gender, the way they view the truth, the way they view reality, individualism, and bodily autonomy. In other words, it is about control. I'm going to share a few examples of how controlled the schools are in the province that I live in, beautiful British Columbia. Starting with our school boards, which there are many examples, by the way, of everything I'm talking about at Rebel News' special website called oh my gosh, how did I forget it? I reported it. StopClassroomGrooming.com. So make sure you remember that. But our school boards are so compromised that I'll use the Chilliwack School Board as an example, whom I'm sure you've heard of many times, but it's an example of how far the state has fallen in this issue. It's not just about what is happening behind school doors with our children, but it is manifesting itself in public meetings where concerned citizens, grandparents, activists, and even former school trustees are shut down when they try to share or question gender ideology in schools. For example, the grandma who wanted to know whether or not her child would be safe, a female child, who would have to go on a trip and share a room potentially with a biological male who identifies as a lady. To that fair question, she was muted and labeled transphobic by the head of the board, sex activist, Willow Rachel. And thanks to the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms for taking on that grandma's case. And it's not just the school boards, it trickles down to the school teachers, depending on which one your child gets. Thanks to the sexual orientation, gender identity program, SOGI 123, we have a fluid program that we cannot shake. And within that program, any activist teacher is free to use any learning resource they want to indoctrinate children with gender ideology and confuse them about who they are, instead of focusing on academics. We have SOGI leaders in schools. And again, your child could win that lottery of that classroom. It's a very frightening thing. And an example of how that plays out is an example near Nelson, BC, where there was a library, a drag queen story time. Can you believe that's been normalized now? Nobody even talks about it anymore because it's just a thing. But there was pushback against a drag queen story time that was set to happen in the library. And after that, the library kind of caved. They said they were getting threats, but as I proved in my report, there was no physical threats or anything like that of danger. But after they canceled, a teacher named Maya decided to retaliate by having her kindergarten class of 4- and 5-year-olds watch a drag queen story time. And she bragged about it by posting their pictures without blurring their identities and putting it on Instagram and saying, if you shut down the local library's drag queen story time, well, then I'll do it with the kids. And the reason that story came to me is because one of the parents was confused when their 4-year-old son was coming home saying they wanted to be a dragon king. And they didn't understand what that meant. And they learned that their child had attended a drag queen story time. And they said to me, to be honest, I'm not even opposed to them. Like, I might have actually taken my own kids there, but there was no parental consent given. And after a campaign that we did at Rebel News to, call for that to be handled, and the teacher was in fact suspended without much explanation, they found out that even after that, their child was being dressed in princess dresses after the fact. And they, again, only found that out from their child. This is kindergarten. And it's not just the SOGI infected teachers. It is also the SOGI infected unions. The unions that arm together against parents and activists and concerned citizens about gender ideology in schools. And they adopt Antifa-like style ways to do it, whether it's tracking parents' license plates at protests, and of course, smearing them with the labels that can get them canceled at their jobs, such as transphobic. And in a recent example, it's the Abbotsford School Union calling on Trustee Jared White and Mike Roush to be forbidden to have any contact around students. Why? Well, because after Trump passed his executive order calling for sanity to return in women's sports, Trustee White did what is quite risky and did a post supporting such, and Mike Roush liked it. And the mainstream media, when they covered that and vilified him as pro-Trump and anti-trans, I saw reporters saying this is not an issue in Abbotsford. During the exact same week that PacWest Basketball League for women's college basketball had suspended their only head female coach because she had taken a stand saying that it is unjust, unfair, and unsafe for her players to have to compete against a 6'2" biological male with the Vancouver Island University. That male is the top player of all women's basketball, and that team, of course, was the top in the season. And lastly, it comes down to the parents, and there's not much we can do about that. We can't do anything about parents who, for some strange reason, are passing this on to their children. But even if we're not the parents, we are around kids, and we can take the time to make sure that they understand that there is importance in this issue. Now, I could go on with many, 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 many examples that are quite frightening, but instead I want to leave you with just 3 simple things that you can do any day to help focus on the kids on this important matter. Number 1 is to support organizations who are doing just that, whether it is news type outlets that are spreading the word, but I also want to put on your radar different places that are coming up with different methods of education in order to protect children's innocence and teach them academics. In some cases, those are parent-led co-ops for homeschool that have gotten together and are doing their best to hire teachers. You can look around for this in your neighborhood. You can reach out to homeschool groups on Facebook and ask if they're aware of any of these types of groups, and I'm sure they'd be happy to tell you. And there are also schools that are independent, that are not taking money from the government, much like Rebel News doesn't, so that they can be free to not force this upon the children. And you can look and support those because they desperately need your help. So that is one way we can do it. The other thing is, of course, to be active in politics. And I know you guys are probably already doing this, but I think something that goes under the radar is we all know to reach out to our MLAs, and we all know to pay attention during, provincial and federal elections and speak about things when politicians are not supporting these safe spaces. But I think something that gets missed a lot is by-elections. These are happening all of the time, and there isn't a lot of focus on them for voters. And so when you have a group of people like this, and they organize to all focus on that riding, and they take the time to understand who the candidates are, and where they stand on this issue. Big things can happen. So I would encourage you to do that. And lastly, as I'm sure we're all doing, is to share. Share the message. It is well known in marketing that the average person needs to see something 7 times before they start to wonder, hey, is that for me? That's why when you watch the Super Bowl, you see the same commercials each time. They pay big bucks to do that because the first time you're not really paying attention. Second time you kind of are. Third time, you might even be on your phone seeing if you can buy it on Amazon. Treat this the same way. You may be called transphobic if you share that report, or you may get ghosted for a while, but you are planting seeds for an important future. And you are protecting the children while you protect safe, same spaces for women, girls. I kind of butchered that last sentence, but let's give me a clap.
Okay, did you guys all catch that? Nothing was written down. She just said that off the top of her head. Oh my God. That was fantastic. Thank you, Drea. So our next speaker is, and I want to say her name as well as I can because it's such a beautiful way that she says it. Ghislaine Gendron has been active in feminist organizations since 2014 and sat on the board of directors of Pour le droit des femmes de Québec until 2021. While with that organization, she was involved with 2 strategic committees focusing on gender identity and surrogacy. She has written numerous articles published in Quebec newspapers. She has contributed to submissions to the provincial and federal governments and has done interviews with media. She's also done presentations on surrogacy in French and English. She is currently National Coordinator for Women's Declaration International, WDI Canada, responsible for Quebec and Francophonie. We are so pleased to have a sister from Quebec with us here today to give us the perspective of what's happening with women's rights in her province. Everyone, please welcome Ghislaine Gendron.
Well, thank you, Maureen. But I'm not the national, I'm the provincial coordinator, yeah. But I hope I practiced several times, but I hope I get it right with my English accent. So I'll go as much as slowly as I can on difficult words. There are some here. So I say hi, sisters. And I am so happy to be here in Alberta, the province of the Premier, Danielle Smith, the first province of Canada that protected women's sport with the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act, and protected children with Health Status Amendment Act to 2024. Thanks to these acts, Danielle Smith is helping to protect young girls against themselves by banning mastectomy surgeries for minors, something that would have been applauded by everyone, including liberals and progressives, just 10 or 15 years ago. Thanks to these acts, fairness and safety in sport will be restored in Alberta. So, yeah. So Alberta is also the province of the astonishing Linda Blade, who helped, hi Linda, who helped this to happen in her province. So thanks to Linda in India. I don't know where the West is. The West is there, or anyway. And we need more Linda Blade and Danielle Smith in Canada. Alberta is also the province of Kathleen Laurie, Rain McLeod, Eva Kurilova, Jenny Morris, and other turfs that I am looking forward to meet and see this weekend. I would like to thank caWsbar, who invited me to this reality-based event. Thank you, caWsbar. Thank you all. And you are doing great work. So now I think it's time to introduce myself. As you can hear, I am from Quebec. Yeah. And born in Montreal. My name is Ghislaine Gendron. You said it perfectly. So I am retired from a career. Retired, is that correct? No. Yeah. It doesn't seem to be correct. Retired. From a career, yeah, in the maritime field. A non-traditional job for women at that time. So therefore, I spent most of my career amongst men, and I felt comfortable with this, because when I was younger, one day I was young, you know. My mother told me that, you know, I was not born old. So I didn't necessarily feel an inclination to spend time with children. I didn't like cooking. I wasn't interested in fine clothes or makeup. I even felt a little bit, I'm telling you, as an imposter at women's gatherings sometimes. I felt I had to play a character that wasn't really me, and a character of womanhood, I thought, you know. So then I read The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir in my early 20s. I also read Germaine Greer and other feminists of the second wave. These women put my feelings into words, and I will always be grateful to them, because thanks to these women, I understood what gender was all about. So in 2014, I volunteered to join the board of directors of the Feminist Association pour les droits des femmes du Québec, which means for the rights of women in Quebec. And I remained there until 2020. Then I became Quebec's coordinator for the WDI, Women's Declaration International, until today. I now realize that I've been engaged in feminism for over 11 years now. And I can't say, thank you. And I can't say how honored I feel to participate to this March 8th celebrations with you today. I think it's worth taking a brief look back at these last 11 years. At the beginning of my personal commitment, we were a small group of women alerted by the resurgence of religious fundamentalism. That's correct, Cindy? A few words about the religion here. Quebec had a past with Catholic Church. The church had strongly interfered in state affairs before the 1960s in our French and Catholic province. It presented itself as the guardian of Quebecers' values, while keeping women outside the clerical hierarchy and decision-making roles. Priests would meet women individually and remind them their duty to the church and to their husbands by having as many babies as possible. So this era was called the revenge of the cradles. I don't know if you heard about this, but it was a big thing. So the demography went very high. So the women of that time were bound by religious injunctions to have more children, regardless of whether they had the financial means to do so, or even a motivation. It was not rare to have more than 12 children at the dinner table at that time. So gradually, Quebecers freed themselves from the church. Catholic churches emptied out in the following decades. Schools and hospitals were secularized, and the French model of secularism influenced our collective choices. So the principles are as follows. The state does not favor religion or non-belief. The state protects freedom of conscience, which includes religion. Oh, this one is hard. Agnosticism. Yeah, okay. And atheism without favoring any. So in Canada and United States, French and English people carry a different past with their relations to religion. In the period of colonization, many English people came to America to escape from religious persecution. They wanted to protect religion from the state interference. In an opposite way, French people wanted to protect the state from religious interference. So they both want separation of state and religions, but they don't protect the same thing. One wants to protect religion, the other wanted to protect the state. So in the 70s and 80s, these religious injunctions towards women did not work anymore for the vast majority of the population in Quebec. We thought we had liberated ourselves and this would never come back. We were sure of that. But it came back from a place we did not expect. It came back through the door of inclusion and the lens of intersectional analysis. So the Federation of Women of Quebec was a jewel of Quebec feminism, and it was created in the 1970s. But in the first decade of years 2000, the Federation started to normalize the veiling of women in schools and daycare centers. Which was really, to us, it was really confronting, I would say. At the same time, the same federation was denouncing Christian religious injunctions, such as the fact that women are excluded in the clerical hierarchy, that the Pope forbids contraception and abortion, that Catholicism venerates virginity, and many other sexist practices. So it was in 2012 that a bunch of women began to be aware of the entry of patriarchal demands into these feminist associations in Quebec. It started with the promotion of religious fundamentalism, presented as a woman empowerment. The veil, a symbol of oppression and apartheid based on sex in Afghanistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, was presented as an act of freedom and women's empowerment. My choice, my right. It is true that feminism is the right to make choices, but it's false to pretend that all choices are empowerments. So a few years later, the Fédération des Femmes du Québec began to nourish ambiguous discourse about prostitution. It had started with the acceptance of a group called Stella into the Federation, which presented itself as a group concerned with the health of women involved in prostitution. Well, that's fine. Then gradually, a new language took hold. They no longer spoke of the sexual exploitation of women, but about choices and sex work. So the Federation had adopted this language as if economic precarity is not a constraint, as if many of these women are not under the control of pimps and organized crime, as if these women didn't need to use drugs just to survive the daily sexual violence they are exposed to. But I never saw any of the women in the Federation who defended the empowerment of prostitution give up their own job to make a career in prostitution. Never saw it. In my view, this is the turning point where language became corrupted. And when a language is corrupted, the thoughts are affected by these lies without any conscience of it. And it slowly finds its path to social disruptions, and it's rarely good news for women and child. So the next chapter I call Feminism for Men. There's a few men here. So, Pour les droits des femmes du Québec, I would say PDF Québec, the association, was founded in 2013 in reaction to this federation's stance about prostitution and its radical shifting about sexist religious demands toward women. 4 years later, a trans-identified man became the president of Federation of Women of Quebec. Yeah. So under his presidency, the Federation definitely positioned itself in favor of recognizing prostitution as a choice, a woman's means of empowerment and a work, and of course, as an inclusion tool for so-called trans women. A few organizations walked out in protest, and a group of women founded PDF Quebec. Patriarchy had taken possession of the women's movement and substituted men's desires to women's demands. The tools were the same as usual in a relationship based on power: intimidation, shame, deprive of money, threats. But with the discourse on gender identity, they added new tools: victimization and perverting language. It was mainly through these means that they succeeded in getting young feminists to adhere to their discourse. The women are socialized to be kind and sadly often place men's needs above theirs. So activists knew this and they were going to use it. So this is how we started to see young women advocating for men's so-called rights to get access to their lockers room, their bathrooms, their sports categories, and even their prison with the Elizabeth Fry's New Politics. In a Me Too era, it's what psychologist Leon Festinger called cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance, as you may know, is a term that describes the state of tension and confusion felt when a person is confronted with contradictory information or belief. To reduce this uncomfortable emotion, some choose to modify their beliefs or their logic thinking. For instance, if a man wears a skirt and pretends to be a woman, the state of dissonance makes some woman exclude the possibilities of him being a rapist. So we are living in a dangerous time for the hard-won woman's right. These rights are very recent in human history and exist only in a few countries around the globe. Today, these rights are threatened with the complicity of willful blindness of counterpowers, media, opposition part, not all media, opposition parties, some feminist groups, some LGBT group, institutions, NGOs, to name just a few. I would like to talk to you about Annie Sugier. She's a French feminist. She founded the International League for Women's Rights in 1981. Some of you were not born, I guess, with Simone de Beauvoir. So I had the honor of interviewing her during our monthly French language webinars in the WDI. So Annie told us in the interview in which circumstances she and de Beauvoir founded this organization. And her testimony is very interesting. In 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini was taking the power and the leading head of the Iranian Republic. That's correct? Thank you. My teacher there. Soon after that, a sex-based apartheid system was established in Iran, with the consequence that you know. Simone and Annie, of course, were surrounded by left-wing intellectual friends and shared their views. During the interview, Annie told me that when they compared the racial apartheid in South Africa to the apartheid based on sex in Iran, the left-wing men around them were offended by this comparison. They told her, "You do not pretend to compare the situation of women with that of the blacks in South Africa, do you?" And so she told me a quick reminder here. In South Africa, apartheid, Black people suffered from segregation during decades. They were not allowed to mix with white people in sports stadiums, places of worship, and they lived under institutionalized segregation. Fortunately for them, they had the right to sing. They had the right to dance, and they had the right to show their hair. Iranian and Afghan women don't. They weren't required to cover themselves from head to toe and show not an inch of flesh. Iranian and Afghan women do. So because of this terrible apartheid, South Africa was banned from participating in the Olympics for 30 years. This is not the case for Iran and Saudi Arabia. At the Barcelona Games in 1992, while a whole stadium applauded Nelson Mandela, Iran was the only delegation that had a man instead of a woman leading athletes and carrying the country's flag. Men don't walk behind a woman. Why the international community and the IOC do nothing for our sisters? The UN Apartheid Convention considered that the state's crime of apartheid can occur only on the basis of race. It seems that nobody at that time considered or thought of the possibility that half of a population can be segregated in an apartheid system on the basis of their sex. So Annie had this thought in the interview, and it struck me. She said, "I end up thinking that universal rights are aimed for men." It really struck me when she said that. So this is also where my own thoughts on this patriarchal counter-revolution have led me. So queer and gender identity discourse do not fool us. I don't use the word theory while talking about queer or gender identity because those are not theories. A theory is a well-founded explanation of some aspect of the word based on a body of evidence and observations. It is developed through scientific methods, including experimentation and reasoning. Theories are not mere guesses or hypotheses. Oh my God. Hypothesis. Hypothesis, she said. Yeah, she said hypoth, yeah. They are grounded in substantial evidence and have been tested and refined over time. So on the opposite, queer and gender identity discourse asserts concept without evidence, without methods, and are supported by contradictory and circular reasoning, as you know. The only word I found that can accurately translate this movement is discourse. It's not a theory. So the discourse on gender identity and queer have mobilized huge amount of money. This discourse has succeeded in influencing researchers, medical associations, political parties, media, some feminist group, some lesbian and gay rights group. Disguised under civil rights clothes, it claims privileges. The privilege to choose to go in a male or a female prison, probably based on their sexual orientation. The privilege to choose their sport category. The privilege to get government-subsidized cosmetic surgeries. The privilege to have access to women's intimate space, and so on. So the discourse is promoted by transhumanism advocates, biotechnologies that seek to enhance human beings, but only succeed in dehumanizing them and create inequities. So biotechnology is hurting women and children, but not only in the gender affirmative industry. It is doing harm to women and children also in reproductive technologies. They experiment with the same drugs on young egg donors. Lupron takes control of their reproductive hormonal system. These drugs shut down their hypothalamus gland and induce artificial menopause to young women. These drugs are given to egg donors and surrogates without knowing their long-term effect. Egg donors are submitted to the process of an ovarian stimulation that forces the simultaneous maturation of dozens of eggs, which is in itself an unprecedented performance by a woman's body in human history. These drugs are administered to them to mislead their body. They don't know what are the long-term effects. All we have are surveys that suggest a rate of breast cancer 22 times higher than the normal female population under the age of 40. But industry doesn't seem to be interested in investigating. Wonder why. So today is March 8th. It's the International Women's Rights Day. It is not a day about trans issues. It is a day about women. The aim of the day is to highlight the struggles for sex equality and raise awareness of women's rights issues around the world. It is about defending women's rights, denouncing discrimination, sex violence, and persistent inequalities between men and women. Linda Blade and other Albertan women succeeded in Alberta. In the United States, they have now an executive order that protects sex-based rights. Thanks to the great advocacy work of our southern border sisters, and I am so sorry, Cara, that Democrats missed completely that vote. We are all aware of the efforts that you put into this. Maybe you are facing a greater amount of political party financing that was expected. I don't know. I understand that this could be a mitigate win for you. Yeah. Maybe as we do, you love the executive order, but not so much the signatures. Anyway, congratulations, Kara. So in Canada, we are seeing, we will soon be in election, I guess. So let's be inspired by Turf Island, and let's get our message to politicians that they won't have our X if they don't respect our sex. Yeah. Yeah. So you have gathered here. We have found each other in Canada, United States, United Kingdom, France, Spain, Italy. We have found sisters in Iran, Afghanistan, and others in Africa and South Africa. You are courageous women. You are the proud heirs of suffragettes, and you are March 8th glorious Amazon. I love you. Thank you. Thank you.
We're not alone out there. Every women's group in every country is gathering. And today, Wolf is organized, as well as Maitreya out of Brazil and the German group. That's what the United Women's Signs are all about. We'd like as many pictures to be taken, and we'd like to get it up on X. We'd like to start a viral sit-in today. Hashtag United Women for 8M. And you know, Afghanistan is on our minds. That's where we can go. That is really, I wake up in the night worried about that, because while that goes on, we are mutilating our children and our girls. So the implications are vast. More than that, we need to stand together as women. Doesn't matter whether we're right wing or left wing or chicken wing, someone wrote the other day. Really, we need to get over it. Support your sisters any way you can. The way you can do it today is take some pictures. We'd like a gathering at the end. I know there's some, you know, worry about whether we're going to show our faces. I'm against that too. But you know, the implications are veils, and that's serious. So let's gather upon. We're Canadian, but we're joining a worldwide movement, and we need to have a good front. They're watching us. Let's stand together.
so here we go with the second part of our day today. We are going to have, as the founder and president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, JCCF, John Carpay has devoted his legal career to defending constitutional freedoms through litigation and education. He considers it a privilege to advocate for courageous and principled clients who take great risks and make tremendous personal sacrifices by resisting the unjust demands of intolerant government authorities. In 2010, John received the Pyramid Award for Ideas and Public Policy in recognition of his work in constitutional advocacy and his success in building up and managing a nonprofit organization to defend citizens' freedoms. We're so pleased he could be here today to give us some more information on how the JCCF works and who it's helping. John, come on up.
Thank you so much, Maureen, and my thanks to all of the volunteers that have put this wonderful event together. And I cannot tell you how deeply honored I feel to be invited to be with you and to say a few words. And I've put an alarm on my phone because I'm going to keep this. They told me I have 10 minutes, so 10 minutes, I'm off of the stage. This is personal for me too, because I have 3 daughters who are aged 19, 16, and 13. And I don't want them to have to be afraid that if they go into a women's change room at a swimming pool or somewhere, I want them to feel peaceful and not afraid that there's going to be a naked man that they're going to be confronted with in a change room. And God forbid if that did happen, I would want the guy arrested and criminally charged, not, you know, affirmed and applauded. So the Justice Center is about 14, 15 years old. We first got acquainted with this issue or became involved with it in around 2019 when there's a certain man was terrorizing immigrant women in British Columbia by demanding a Brazilian bikini wax. And so we got on board and in the human rights proceedings and were able to defend these women. One of the women told us she had been to 17 different law firms to get help on facing a human rights complaint from Yaniv over having refused to do a Brazilian bikini wax. And it was a political stunt because there is an alternative thing called a manzillion that I don't know anything about, but there's a separate clinic. There's a separate clinic for not a clinic, but you know, there wasn't a need for it in any event. But these 17 or so law firms, I forgot the exact number, but it was more than 10, and they all said, well, we're not going to provide you with legal representation because then we're going to be publicly denounced and humiliated for being transphobic, and you know we can't handle that. So it was pretty sad. I used to think that lawyers were the ones that were willing to be unpopular and take on a cause on principle, even if 99% of the population disagreed. It was like, this is the right thing to do. And now you've got these wimps of law firms that won't do that. So, you know, with the Justice Center, we don't care. You can call us whatever name you want, or, you know, transphobic or hateful or whatever. We know the name calling is false. We don't care. We're just going to move ahead and do what needs to get done. And I'm very grateful for Amy's courage. She's going to speak next, and it's just an honor and a privilege for the Justice Center to have been able to be involved in her case, with, you know, and thanks to the generosity of donors to pay for her lawyer, Lisa Bildy, who has done a terrific job. And the generosity of donors, you know, makes it possible as well for things that you wouldn't believe. Like we had to pay, I don't remember if the amount was $50,000 or $20,000. We had to pay for an expert scientific report for an expert to come and testify that believe it or not, there are only 2 genders. but this is where we're at. And so I'm very grateful to people that are all across Canada. We have donors that make it possible for us to help people like Amy Hamm. We're face to face with Yaniv again in a case in Ontario suing, or I think a human rights complaint against Galaxy Beauty Pageant because they had a policy of women only. Or if you're an ex-male fully transitioned, you could also take part in their beauty pageant, but you couldn't go in any event. That's going to be another case that is kind of reactivating itself. Last but not least, we are aware of and intensely involved with the whole situation with women's prisons. And I know that lawyers in the Justice Centers Network have been very active already, spending a lot of time laying the groundwork for that. And it's extremely important to fight these battles. We don't win all of our cases, but even when we lose a case, it's still important. It's a vehicle for getting the message out there. And it's a vehicle for exposing the truth. We lost Brian Peckford's challenge to the travel restrictions for Canadians who didn't get injected. That case was denounced moot, or judged to be determined to be moot by the judge, which was unfortunate and ill-founded. But in the course of that litigation, we had government officials admit under oath that there was no medical or scientific basis to support these travel restrictions, right? So sometimes the litigation process, it exposes truth in a way because you get the government officials are compelled to testify under oath. And people sometimes do lie under oath, but they're a lot less likely to lie under oath than if it's outside of a court proceeding. So in closing, I just want to say I commend you for the organizing. This is so important. The enemies of the free society they make you feel alone, right? Like you're the only person who's, you're a kook, you're an idiot, you're the only person who believes this, right? But when we organize together, this is the exercise of our Charter Freedom of Association. It's individuals who voluntarily come together and choose. So you're exercising your Charter Freedom of Association by creating this organization and exercising your freedom of peaceful assembly and your freedom of expression, and also for many people, your freedoms of conscience and religion in advocating. And this is what makes a difference. There's three quotes closely related. You've probably heard this from Edmund Burke. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And you're not doing nothing. And so that's... The other one is related. It's an old French proverb that says, if you don't do politics, then politics will be done unto you. And so we make the difference just by being involved and engaged federally, provincially, municipally. You don't always win the first time. You might run for school board to get some better school board policies in place to protect children, and you might fall flat on your face and come in last, or you might be part of a slate that is just crushed. But that's okay, because 3 years later there's another election. You learn how to become more effective when participating in the democratic process. And the other proverb, similar to the first two, is by Plato, and this is not an exact quote, but those who are not involved in political affairs are doomed to suffer the consequence of being governed by their inferiors. So, if you don't want to be governed by people that have a very flawed understanding, if you don't want to be governed by people who don't understand what a woman is, then, we got to roll up our sleeves and be... So again, thank you so much for inviting me to be with you today. And I applaud you for your work. and you will succeed in the end. And I know this to be true because truth always vanquishes the lie, and freedom always prevails over tyranny, and justice will always ultimately triumph over injustice. And so we are going to practice the virtues of courage to speak truth to power, no matter how ugly and vicious the name calling is. I always laugh at name calling. I think, hey, if you got to start calling me names, you obviously don't have a case. You don't have an intelligent argument, do you? If you need to be, pushing the hateful, racist, transphobic, whatever. So we're going to practice the virtues of courage to speak truth to power. The other one that's so important is the virtue of perseverance, and that's to keep on going. You're probably not going to get big victories in the next few days or weeks or even months, but you got to look at the long haul. And when we roll up our sleeves and stay involved and stay active in participating in the democratic process, we are going to achieve those victories and restore sanity and justice to our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Another one that just comes up here and speaks so beautifully off the cuff. Okay, our next speaker is Amy Hamm. Amy is a founding member of caWsbar. She's a writer for the National Post, Redux, and other publications. She is also a registered nurse who, as we all know, has been waiting. It'll be a year next week since the final hearing, right? Yeah. To find out if she can keep her nursing license after refusing to bow down to gender ideology. She's the mom of 2 little boys, and the toll this fiasco has had on her and her family has been, as far as many of us are concerned, cruel and unusual punishment. Believe it or not, it's been 5 years since the billboard. 5 years. It's been so nice getting to chat with her here in person, and we're so grateful to her for coming this weekend to speak to us all. Please give Amy a very warm welcome to one of the founding members of caWsbar.
I'm very excited to be here, and I also wanted to say thank you to John Carpay. And this fight that's been going on for years wouldn't have been possible without the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. There's just no way, because the psychological burden compounded by a financial burden, the fact that the financial burden of fighting this fight has been lifted is honestly what has made it possible. And the work that your organization does for Canadians is just, I don't think people realize how important it is. And you guys are indispensable. So thank you so much. And I also just wanted to, you talked about the wax cases, which for some reason keep coming up today, even though we didn't want to talk about it. But even, I think it was 2 or 3 years before that was my first involvement with the Justice Center. And that was when I was organizing an event with another woman at the Vancouver Public Library. Yeah, so this was about gender identity ideology, and this was shortly after I had become obsessed with the topic. And the Vancouver Public Library had promptly decided that we were all bigots, and they tried to cancel our event by slapping us with an enormous security bill that, of course, we couldn't pay as just a couple of women volunteering to do this event. So ultimately what happened was the Justice Center agreed to fight and take on our case. And the event went through, and it was held at the Vancouver Public Library. Much to their chagrin, they didn't want us there, but we did it anyways. And they still tried to get some money out of us, but with the excellent work from the Justice Center lawyers, we never paid a dime of their security bill. They never came after us, and the event went through as planned. So thank you for that. So today I want to speak to you about defeating gender ideology in Canada after our next federal election, and what a tumultuous road our country has been on, just waiting for this election that feels like it might never come, and it's still not exactly clear when it will. I've been calling this period in Canada political purgatory. it really does feel like we're trapped in some in-between country. It's not the Canada we knew, and it's not the Canada that we want, and here we are. So I am pleased that there are rumblings about Mark Carney, should he win the leadership race for his party, call an early election. I think that will be great. And at the same time, Carney's honeymoon with the media and the public appears to be over. It looks as though whatever bump he was providing to the Liberal Party isn't going to be significant to take away the Pierre Poilievre conservative majority government that I think we can all feel coming. And so putting aside any reservations that some of us might have about the right side of the political spectrum, I do think it's widely accepted among gender critical or sex realist persons that our Conservative Party is no longer sympathetic to wokeness, which of course includes gender ideology. As such, they are the best party to represent us in this fight. We are going to, in 2025, end up with a government that recognizes females as a distinct sex class from males. And it is thrilling just to say that out loud. So whether we'll see the types of sweeping promises to women and girls that we saw President Trump make with his executive orders on biological sex and women's sports remains to be seen. But regardless, there will finally be members of parliament and a prime minister who recognize reality, are not afraid of reality, and are hopefully willing to do something about it. But not without our ongoing work and dedication, which takes me back to the purpose of my talk, and that is to start a dialogue about the work that we have left to do. Gender ideology, we know, is a house of cards, and in some places it's falling. In Canada, it rather feels as though someone built our gender ideology house of cards using crazy glue. Crazy glue, of course, being the only type of glue that could hold such a wacky and flimsy house together. But so anyways, we're going to have to dismantle this thing on our own. We can't simply rely upon Poilievre or his MPs to do this without our prodding and our helping and our insisting, and we will. We must also recognize that our work on shifting our culture and opening the eyes of our fellow Canadians is not over, and it is crucial. So let's get into that. I've been reading John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, which he wrote in 1859, and I need to share a passage with you today. So for those who are not familiar, On Liberty, it's both a defense of freedom and an examination of tyranny. Mill wrote, like other tyrannies, the tyranny of the majority was at first, and is still vulgarly, held in dread, chiefly as operating through the acts of public authorities. But reflecting persons perceive that when society itself is the tyrant, society collectively over the separate individuals who compose it, its means of tyrannizing are not restricted to the acts which it may do by the hands of its political functionaries. Society can and does execute its own mandates. And if it issues wrong mandates instead of right, or any mandates at all in things with which it ought not to meddle, it practices a social tyranny more formidable than many kinds of political oppression, since, though not usually upheld by such extreme penalties, it leaves fewer means of escape, penetrating much more deeply into the details of life and enslaving the soul itself. Protection, therefore, against the tyranny of the magistrate is not enough. There needs protection also against the tyranny of the prevailing opinion and feeling, against the tendency of society to impose, by other means than civil penalties, its own ideas and practices as rules of conduct on those who dissent from them, to fetter the development and, if possible, prevent the formation of any individuality not in harmony with its ways, and compel all characters to fashion themselves upon the model of its own. There is a limit to the legitimate interference of collective opinion with individual independence, and to find that limit and maintain it against encroachment is as indispensable to a good condition of human affairs as protection against political despotism. When I read this passage, I can't stop thinking about gender ideology. Mill spoke on the tyranny of a prevailing orthodoxy and orthodoxy on what he called wrong mandates, or mandates that should not be imposed at all. That is gender ideology. Mill said the enforcement of a wrong mandate creates a unique type of oppression. It's a deep oppression. It afflicts victims to their core in their everyday lives. That's contrasted to the oppression inflicted upon citizens via a political tyranny. And we need to, he said, figure out the guardrails or appropriate limits to how a prevailing orthodoxy, but an appropriate one, not based on a wrong mandate, might infringe upon our liberties. That's the same concept of figuring out the guardrails of a political system where you need to have defined individual rights versus constitutional checks. In Canada, gender ideologues are currently inflicting both tyrannies on all of us, the social tyranny and the political tyranny. Both need to be dismantled. What does the social tyranny look like? It's this. It's the people who disowned us, their friends, for refusing to say that trans women are women. They've inflicted social penalties where they don't have the power to inflict political ones. It's their shunning, their excommunication, and their gossip. These are painful and punishing things to have happen to a social creature, as we all are. The impact is often profound, as I'm sure that many of us in this room can attest to. The social tyranny is also every act of fealty performed in service of gender ideology, despite one's internal discomfort, from adding pronouns to your work email signature when you know that it's a silly thing to do and it irks you irritatingly. It's also the pit of fear that women and girls shove into the depths of their being when they feel their natural and biological reaction to a male, to an unknown threat, within the spaces where they want to be and deserve to be safe and away from males. It's the voice inside of their minds that says, I'm afraid, or I'm uncomfortable, or even hell, that's a linebacker in stilettos in a dollar store wig. But which the mind suppresses forcibly under the social tyranny and ignores. And then there's the political tyranny. Our government undermined and eviscerated women's sex-based rights by legislating gender ideology into our Human Rights Act and our criminal code. We know this. We know that Bill C-16 and the addition of gender identity into our laws was not an act of liberty. It was not an act to provide any necessary or absent freedoms within our society, certainly not for women. It was an act that legislated tyranny against our sex class. Our governments and institutions since 2017 have been infiltrated and taken over by many who either gleefully or thoughtlessly impose gender ideology's social tyranny. And within our institutions, they exercise with politics the very same coercive and evil mandates. Many of these people will remain in positions of power even after a federal election. We can look to the United States to see what sort of struggles are ahead of us. This week, Democrats in the US Senate managed to thwart and block passage of the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. Of course, it would have made sports sex segregated, as they should be. Women like Dansky, she's been doing ongoing work to meet with political opponents, to meet with Democrats, to explain the issue. Because within this political and social tyranny of gender ideology that we're all living under, some people still simply do not understand what's going on. They do not fully understand the opposition to this issue, or they haven't examined their complicity in upholding gender ideology. They're not enforcers, so to speak, so much as people who are executing the mandates of the social tyranny because it has so infiltrated their minds. And they still might be convinced otherwise if shown the illogic and the cruelty of the positions they've assumed. If encouraged to listen to the voice inside their minds that knows that all of gender ideology is a lie. And if they're shown that the immense pressure that they are under to conform to gender orthodoxy is in 2025 a pressure exerted by a smaller and smaller minority of hateful zealots. And that pain that one expects to feel if and when they refuse to continue to execute the mandates of this social tyranny from within their positions of political power is not pain, but instead is a path to freedom and a path to self-respect. We, all of us, can lead the way by showing and convincing such persons how we personally have been targeted, but ultimately foiled gender ideology's social tyranny. And while it hasn't always been easy, we have a clear conscience for having done so. We need to get through to people like this. Cowardice is ultimately a lot more painful than living in reality. I know that many of us are already tackling this difficult work in their own communities. What I want to impress upon everyone is that we have no time to let off the gas, even if or when we get a new government. Our fight is far from over, and in some respects, it's about to get more difficult. But that is only because we are on the precipice of victory. In psychology, the principle of extinction burst refers to an intensification of an unwanted behavior when that behavior stops being reinforced. An extinction burst looks like a tantrum or a fit performed when one is not getting what they are accustomed to receiving. We must expect a great extinction burst from Canada's gender tyrants once the country has elected a government that no longer caters to their falsehoods. And we must remember that these tyrants or their uncritical minions are widespread within our government and institutions. Our Senate, where Justin Trudeau just appointed 5 new senators days before he's out as Prime Minister, and 10 total in this year alone, and our judiciary, where our Supreme Court has a majority of judges, 6 out of 9, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but that were appointed by Justin Trudeau. We can pray for, but we should not expect their impartiality. Our healthcare regulators are similarly stacked institutions. The BC College of Nurses, need I say more? Well, their CEO and registrar was just appointed as BC's Deputy Minister of Health by our NDP government. No doubt this was an intentional move to place a reality-denying gender cultist into a higher position of power at a time when the BC NDP must answer to an opposition party that doesn't entertain their nonsense ideology. We can look at all of this and we can feel dismayed, but I suggest feeling hopeful and motivated instead. Last year, when we met on International Women's Day in Toronto, I wouldn't have believed it possible for Canadians to repeal Bill C-16. I do think it's possible now. We've made enormous gains over the past year. We've mainstreamed opposition to gender ideology in Canada. That's huge. That's huge. Nobody can point to us and say that we are lone bigots, strangely obsessed with others' genitals. No, that ship has sailed. The public largely knows that this is not some niche issue that we're here speaking about today. Gender tyrants do not deserve the power that they currently hold. John Stuart Mill's On Liberty reminds us of the seriousness of the behavior of these people. Some people believe that we should just ignore gender ideology until it goes away, not understanding that gender ideology is not going to suffocate under the weight of its own bullshit. Because it's more than a nonsense ideology. It's a vehicle for the social and political tyranny that plagues mass societies across space and time. This is a noble fight. It is a fight for women, for children, and for liberty. We, all of us, are a force against a brutal form of social and political tyranny. Keep up the fight because we are so close to winning. And happy International Women's Day. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you, Amy. That was so great. Our next speaker is Heather Mason. Heather is a former federal prisoner turned activist who has made it her life's mission to advocate for the rights of criminalized women. Over the past 6 years, she has highlighted critical prison issues, including the injustices of segregation and strip searching, while bringing awareness to the controversial practice of transferring male prisoners to women's prisons. This important work has led her to join forces with like-minded women in founding Canadian Women's Sex-Based Rights, caWsbar, a grassroots organization, as we all know, dedicated to upholding women's rights to single-sex spaces. She is a no-nonsense, tell it like it is woman. In that regard, we are kindred spirits. Tough on the outside, but on the inside, like many women, she juggles so much with family, kids, work, and advocacy. She's become a beacon of hope and a touchstone for so many women in Canadian prisons, and somehow she manages it all. I'm so pleased to call her my friend. Please welcome Heather Mason.
Thank you, Maureen. Thanks everyone for being here. I actually wanted to start with giving thanks to Lisa, because Lisa gave out all the thanks today and nobody has thanked her. You did, I'm very proud of you. So this event wouldn't be possible without her. Lisa is the creative force driving the visuals for the event, encompassing branding, marketing, video production, graphic design. That is all Lisa. Also, what's Lisa, and I'm gonna say I'm grateful that this event has concluded, is it's now allowing me a reprieve from discussions regarding budget, overages, balancing, and yes, and Maureen likely shares my thinking because she's escaping conversations about spreadsheets and Excel. But those are Lisa's skills, and those are skills that the two of us are definitely not dominant in. So Lisa deserves our appreciation. So let's all extend a round of applause in her honor. You know, I was thinking this morning about my very first International Women's Day, and that was March 8th, 2018. And I was actually in Grand Valley Institution for Women. I never even knew about International Women's Day until that day. And now to think, like, look at me now, right? Yeah. So as most of you know, my name's Heather Mason. I'm a former federal prisoner. I was sentenced to 3 years at Grand Valley Prison for Women in Kitchener, Ontario, beginning in 2017. Most of you know my history, some of you may not, but I dealt with an addiction to fentanyl, and I was in and out of jails, and then I ended up in prison. When I was in prison, it was in 2017, and I was incarcerated when Bill C-16 was enacted, and where Justin Trudeau personally directed the Correctional Service of Canada to modify the transfer policy. Because previously it was you had to have surgery in order to be transferred, and then afterwards you no longer need it. You know, I found it challenging to compose this speech. I feel that my messages are repetitive, and I worry that the audience may be growing weary of hearing the same content repeatedly. Drafting this speech, my efforts to streamline my narrative by omitting specific details and transitioning to other topics was short-lived. I quickly realized that conveying the essence of prisons demands revisiting foundational elements. And this is owing to the general public's limited knowledge of their history, their structure, their operational procedures. And what made me understand the complexity of this topic, which is a little interesting, I opened my Word doc on my computer to begin drafting this speech, and I encountered a prompt for the first time suggesting the use of a co-pilot feature to assist in creating a draft. I attempted to utilize this feature, but was unsuccessful. The complexity of the subject matter appears to exceed the capabilities of AI in generating a draft. I was like, all right, then I'm on my own. So I apologize if my remarks are resemble those from last year. However, I believe that it is essential for us to share a common foundational understanding as we advance towards advocating for the removal of men from women's prisons. To commence this address, it is essential to provide a historical overview of women's incarceration in Canada. I want to showcase the extensive struggle and the significant duration it took to establish the current state of women's prisons. So this journey actually began in 1835, when women were confined within Kingston Penitentiary, which is a men's prison, a facility designed for men, and they were confined to the hospital ward. They weren't even given their own range pod wing. This initial arrangement highlighted the systematic neglect of women's needs within the penal system, as they were not afforded a separate and appropriate space for their incarceration. In 1839, a shift occurred when women were relocated to the north wing of Kingston Penitentiary, which was designated as the women's section. However, this space provided inadequate as it was overcrowded, forcing women to sleep in hallways and endure the harsh conditions of cold, damp, and insect-infested cells. It was not until 1934 that the prison for women, also known as P4W, was established across from the men's facility, marking a significant milestone after 99 years of women being housed in unsuitable environments within the men's prison. Despite this advancement, the new prison faced immediate scrutiny. The first commission advocated for its closure shortly after opening. It didn't end up being the win we thought it was. P4W became the subject of numerous reports and commissions, no fewer than 15, calling for its closure due to various criticisms, including absence of sex-specific programming, the geographical separation of women from their families, inappropriate classification practices, and the overrepresentation of Indigenous women, which we're still dealing with today. The conditions were so dire that it was remarked that the facility was unfit even for bears, let alone for women. In response to these ongoing issues, the Task Force on Federally Sentenced Women was established in 1989, leading to the release of the pivotal report Creating Choices in 1990. This report laid the foundation for the development of the 6 regional prisons for women that we have across Canada. And the one here in Alberta is in Edmonton. I'm sure a lot of you in this room were there protesting with me back in 2021. Ultimately, P4W was closed in 2000 because it became clear the facility could not meet the needs of female prisoners. So in December 2017, the Correctional Service of Canada, CSC, issued a policy bulletin 584, which emphasized the organization's obligation to provide accommodations based on an individual's gender identity or expression, regardless of their physical anatomy or their sex designation on their identification documents, except in cases where significant health and safety issues could not be addressed. Afterwards, in May 2022, CSC released a comprehensive policy that superseded the policy bulletin 584. It's titled CD 100 Gender Diverse Offenders. So recent data indicates that a significant percentage of male individuals identifying as women are classified as maximum security prisoners. A report published by the Correctional Service of Canada revealed that 44% of these individuals are convicted sex offenders. Not surprised. While a striking 86% are serving time for violent crimes. This demographic of male prisoners tends to be incarcerated for indeterminate sentences, with a notable prevalence of violent offenses among them. Furthermore, there is a disproportionately high incidence of homicide-related charges within this group, suggesting that the male prisoners who identify as women are often among the most dangerous offenders. The significance of these statistics prompts critical inquiries into the management and categorization of male prisoners within the women's correctional system. The blending of data from these two distinct groups raises concerns, particularly as it obscures the unique experiences and backgrounds of women. Given the relatively small size of the female prison population compared to their male counterparts, the inclusion of violent crimes committed by individuals such as your Matthew Harks, Frederick Radcliffe, Michael Williams, Stephen Mellenbacher, and the list goes on, into the statistical profiles of women distorts the understanding of women's pathways to criminal behavior. This distortion is particularly troubling as it affects various aspects of the correctional process, including risk assessments during sentencing, federal prison intake procedures, security classifications, reclassifications, programming, and parole decisions. The integration of male statistics into women's data can lead to severe consequences for female prisoners, as it may result in inappropriate risk evaluations and misinformed policy decisions. The ramifications of such data misrepresents could undermine the rehabilitation efforts and overall treatment of women in the correctional system, further complicating their reintegration into society, and perpetuating cycles of disadvantage and criminality. The implementation of this policy has coincided with a notable rise in incidents of male pattern violence and offenses within the facility. Reports indicate that individuals have been observed engaging in alarming behaviors, such as peering through cell windows, displaying their genitals openly, making declarations about their ability to engage in sexual relations with any women they choose. Additionally, there have been instances of harassment, grooming, accompanied by inappropriate and aggressive sexually suggestive remarks. The situation has escalated to including stalking, physical assaults, and even sexual assaults occurring in bathrooms, leading to severe consequences such as unwanted pregnancies. The fear of retaliation has deterred many women from reporting these assaults as they worry about facing institutional charges or being reprimanded for actions beyond their control. Numerous women have expressed concerns about witnessing men violating facility rules without facing any consequences from correctional staff. This lack of accountability has a negative impact on the women. They've reported difficulties in assessing or continuing programming designed to address pathways leading to their criminality, particularly when such programs include the presence of these individuals with a history of predatory behavior. I'm going to deviate from my speech because I want you to hear about what I've been dealing with lately with the women that are inside. So the last few months, I have had numerous women call, put me on their pen list so that they have permission to call, three-way call, write letters, any way that they could contact me at all, have their friends and family contact me. That's what I've been doing. There is a man named Frederick Radcliffe who is at Grand Valley Prison for Women in Ontario, and he's actually designated as a dangerous offender. He has multiple sexual crimes committed against women, teenage girls. He is a predator. He has been a man his entire life. He was charged as a man. He was incarcerated as a man. He tried to appeal his dangerous offender designation as a man. And once he was denied that appeal, he started identifying as a woman. He went to Grand Valley in, I want to say, about October 2023. And I started getting frantic phone calls October last year Frederick was preying on the women at Grand Valley. He was grooming them, groping them, touching them. He was in the Indigenous house with the Indigenous women, and he actually got removed from the Pathways house because of his sexual predatorness. He was moved to House 11, and in House 11, there is a woman who was in there who she was sexually assaulted by Stephen Mellenbacher in 2020. So she actually charged Steve with criminal harassment and sexual assault, and she lived in House 11, and they moved Frederick Radcliffe into that house with her. And she started calling me and very upset and concerned, wanted to know why CSC would do this to her and put her in a vulnerable situation, knowing that she was already vulnerable to these men. She wanted to know why her rights didn't matter, why nobody cared, why nothing was being done. Another woman in the house ended up making a report against Frederick because he groped her and was making comments about, "Ooh, you're younger than my last victim." He would sit in the living room. So the houses at GVI, they have 9 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a living room, a dining room, a kitchen. It's like a little dorm, a cottage, right? And so there's the main communal space where the women will watch TV, and he would sit there in a long t-shirt with nothing on underneath and open his legs and expose himself to the women. He ended up pushing another woman up against the wall upstairs by the bathroom near the library, and he shoved his hands down her pants. She also made a report to CSC, and they involved the police. He's been moved to maximum security, and he's been in maximum security since October now. The other day, as Maureen liked to tell people, I was with the bones. I was actually in Drumheller looking at dinosaur bones. But I got a phone call, and it was an unknown number, and like I wasn't going to answer it. Luckily I did. And it was a correctional officer, and she wanted to know if I would speak with 2 of the women prisoners there. And I said, yeah, put them on the phone. I had 2 women who are in maximum security at GVI call me because they knew that I was a person that they could call and report to, and that I would tell people what is going on. A male who goes by the name Bunny Autumn, I don't know his real name yet, but he was just transferred there on Thursday from Millhaven. He came onto the maximum security range, and he put his hair up, started posturing, cracking his knuckles and threatening the women. He wanted to fight the women. So now all the women are on modified, which means they let the women out for a couple hours. They have to go back into their cells, so then they can let the men out. So the women who called me, there's 3 maximum security pods at GVI, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's 5 cells. So Frederick and Bunny are on 1 pod, which means that they are taking up 2 of the cells. And then the rest of the women are in the other cells. Now they're not supposed to double bunk, but they have been. But I asked the women if they had to share a cell. Thankfully, they don't. But there's limited space back there. And now these men are taking even more space, which is causing them to have to double bunk with other women. They're very upset. They didn't know what to do. And they promised to put me on their pin list so that they can call me anytime they wanted. But those are just some of the things that have been happening recently that I have been dealing with and trying to get the word out to the public about and try to get their statements so that I can do something more. There's incidents that have happened all across Canada in these women's prisons, same types of incidents. And when you're dealing with the prison system, the public doesn't know what's going on unless somebody inside tells you. CSC doesn't have to keep reports or make reports because who's going to make them, right? So I just wanted to share a little bit of what I've been dealing with lately with the women inside and the men that are inside. I'm going to wrap this up because I deviated from my speech and I don't know how long I've been. But tomorrow we are protesting in downtown Calgary. We are protesting to keep men out of women's prisons. We are protesting to protect women's spaces. And I need you. I have the signs, I will go, but I need you. So we did send out an email with all the info, but we will be 8th Ave, downtown Calgary between 1 and 3. And we're going to meet at the TELUS Convention Center. But I have signs. I think we have some banners, right? Yes, okay. But we just need bodies. Get out there. Rain has tons of pamphlets that she printed off about prisons. We can hand them out, have conversations with people. We need to let the public know what's going on. We need to help these women inside. They need our help, and we need to be their voice. And with that, I am going to give it back to Maureen. Thank you.
Okay, our final speaker, who has waited patiently at the end listening to all our Canadian stuff, is Cara Dansky, beloved Cara Dansky from the United States. Cara is a lawyer, a feminist, and a writer. She is the author of The Reckoning: How the Democrats and the Left Betrayed Women and Girls, and The Abolition of Sex: How the Transgender Agenda Harms Women and Girls. She served as president and member of the board of directors of the U.S. chapter of Women's Declaration International from 2021 to 2024, and member of the board of directors of the Women's Liberation Front, WOLF, from 2016 to 2020. Before turfing herself out of a career, she was considered a U.S. national expert on criminal justice policy and served as senior counsel of the ACLU's Center for Justice from 2012 to 2014. She has a JD from the University of Pennsylvania Law School and a BA from Johns Hopkins University. Just a quick word. I had the opportunity to protest with WDI USA and Cara in Philadelphia in 2023. I learned so much from them in just 3 days. Trial by fire is a perfect way to describe it, and I loved every minute of it. One thing that stood out to me, and I haven't spoken to her about it, was that Cara changed her shoes to boots before we headed out to the protest. In my mind, I called them her suffragette boots. To me, they were part of her uniform, along with the sashes that we wore to put her and us in a certain frame of mind and embolden us to help us feel like we had a job to do. I'll always be grateful to her and Lier for letting me participate, listen, watch, and learn. Cara, come on up.
Thanks, everyone. While I'm getting ready, I wasn't going to do this, but since Ghislaine and Amy both mentioned the vote on the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, I thought I would give a little bit of insight into what went on. Thank you. Behind the scenes. So what I'm about to tell you was made public the day after the vote concerning some behind the scenes work that was done to get one. We wanted one Senate Democrat to vote yes on this thing. We would have loved 7, which is what we needed to get it through, but we would have taken 1. So we had a list. A friend gave me a list of Senate Democrats that we thought might stand a chance of voting yes. And we had various reasons for thinking that. Some of them were up for re-election in 2026 and are vulnerable on this issue. Some of them represent states that recently passed a Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act in their own states, and there were other reasons. So we had this list of about 10 or 12 Senate Democrats that we thought might vote yes. So a group of us got in touch with women in their states. We found actual constituents who were willing to request meetings with their Senate Democrats. And I got a commitment from Martina Navratilova to attend those meetings virtually. So all of these constituents sent email messages to their Senate Democrats asking for meetings and saying that Martina Navratilova was willing to meet with them virtually. 100% of them either ignored or denied their own constituents and a woman who is possibly the best female athlete in history. That's how bad this is. So I'm going to now name them. They are, again, this is all public, so I'm not telling any secrets. We kept it secret in the weeks leading up to the vote because we wanted to give these Democrats a chance to do the right thing. And they didn't. So here we go. Senator Also Brooks from Maryland, Senator Booker from New Jersey, Senator Cortez Masto, I'm spacing on her state, I think it's New Mexico, Senator John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, Senator Ruben Gallego from Arizona, Senator Hassan, I'm spacing on her state too, I think it's Michigan, Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, Senator Andy Kim from New Jersey, Senator Angus King, who's not a Democrat, he's an independent, but we included him, from Maine, Senator John Ossoff from Georgia, who is up for re-election in 2026 and lives in a state that just passed a Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, with some Democrats breaking ranks with the party and voting yes, and he is in big trouble in my view. Senator Gary Peters, I'm spacing on his state, Senator Jackie Rosen, I believe Jackie Rosen is also in New Mexico, Senator Jean Shaheen from New Hampshire, also up for re-election in 2026, Senator Slotkin from Michigan, and Senator Mark Warner from Virginia. All of these senators had a chance to meet with their constituents and with Martina Navratilova, and they either ignored or declined the requests. Before not voting yes on the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act in the Senate, 100% of them voted no, with the exception of Senator Slotkin, who didn't vote. Okay, now that that is out of the way. Okay, I am so happy to be here with the Canadian Women's Sex-Based Rights. Thank you so much for having me here today to celebrate International Women's Day. So I thought I would talk a bit about where I think we are today in the movement to protect the sex-based rights of women and girls and to stop the abolition of sex globally, understanding that we're all in different places in our various countries. There's a tool called the Movement Action Plan that is a fascinating analysis of social movements, which I'm going to refer to using the acronym MAP. This is not, of course, to be confused with the Movement Advancement Project, which works with the Trevor Project to trans kids, or to the rather revolting phrase, minor attracted person. So when I use the acronym MAP here today, I mean the Movement Action Plan. It was drafted by a man named Bill Moyer in 1987. So although it's younger than many of us, it's pretty old, but that doesn't lessen its utility. The map describes 8 stages through which social movements normally progress over a period of years and decades. For each stage, the map describes the role of the public, power holders, and the movement. It provides organizers with a map of the long road of successful movements, which helps them guide their movement along the way. I have found it to be an exceptionally useful tool in thinking about where we are in the movement to protect the sex-based rights of women and girls and to stop the abolition of sex. So Moyer identified 8 stages of social movements. Stage 1 is normal times. 2 is the proving the failure of institutions. 3 is ripening conditions. 4 is social movement takeoff. 5 is identity crisis of powerlessness. 6 is majority public support. 7 is success. And 8 is continuing the struggle. So he describes it, normal times, as essentially a basic state of injustice that a given movement opposes. So I would argue that in the movement to stop the abolition of sex, normal times began with the emergence of the word transgender in the early 1990s and lasted through around 2010. During those 20 or so years, there were hardly any voices speaking out against the concept that some men could be women by calling themselves transgender, though a tiny handful of radical feminists certainly were, beginning with Professor Janice Raymond's 1994 republication of the 1979 book, The Transsexual Empire. For purposes of this analysis, I am just ignoring the problem of the men who pretended to be women before the 1990s, the men we used to call transsexuals. I understand that was a real problem, and I don't wish to understate it. I simply mean that for today's purposes and the purpose of this analysis, it seems to me that the biggest problem we have had to fight against is the popular acceptance of the concept of transgender, which got introduced in the early 1990s. In stage 2, The movement is required to prove the failure of institutions to the general public. I think I would argue that that started happening around 2010 to 2015. It had become obvious to more and more people by then that trans is an injustice against humanity in general and against women and girls in particular. The Women's Liberation Front was established in 2013 for this purpose, for example. In London, radical feminists held conferences called RadFem 2012 and RadFem 2013 to discuss the threats that trans poses to women and girls from a radical feminist perspective. In 2014, the UK/Australian radical feminist Sheila Jeffreys published Gender Hurts, and I'm going to read the back cover of the book. It is only recently that transgenderism has been accepted as a disorder for which treatment is available. In the 1990s, a political movement of transgender activism coalesced to campaign for transgender rights. Considerable social, political, and legal changes are occurring in response, and there is increasing acceptance by governments and many other organizations and actors of the legitimacy of these rights. This provocative and controversial book explores the consequences of these changes and offers a feminist perspective on the ideology and practice of transgenderism, which the author sees as harmful. It explores the effects of transgenderism on the lesbian and gay community, the partners of people who transgender, children who are identified as transgender, and the people who transgender themselves, and argues that these are negative. In doing so, the book contends that the phenomenon is based on sex stereotyping, referred to as gender, a conservative ideology that forms the foundation for women's subordination. Gender Hurts argues for the abolition of gender, which would remove the rationale for transgenderism. So that was Sheila Jeffreys in 2014. Also in 2014, radical feminists, including the Women's Liberation Front, met in Portland, Oregon to organize. Michelle Goldberg published an article about that meeting in The New Yorker titled, "What is a Woman?" No, Matt Walsh did not invent that question. Things were heating up and activists were working hard to prove that our institutions had failed to protect us against the threats of trans. So stage 3 is called ripening conditions. I would argue that happened around 2015 to 2020. According to the map, the takeoff, which is stage 4, which I'll get to in a minute, of a new social movement requires preconditions that build up over many years. These conditions include broad historic developments, a growing discontented population of victims and allies, and a budding autonomous grassroots opposition, all of which encourage discontent with the present conditions, raise expectations that they can change it, and provide the means to do it. So there's no doubt that this has happened globally, and I'm arguing that it happened 2015 to 2020. During this time, US radical feminists often felt like we were shouting into the wind. I joined Wolf in early 2015, and from 2016 to 2020 served on its board. During this time, I and other Wolf members diligently filed brief after brief in federal court, held events, and tried to grow our numbers. As everyone here knows, it was also during this time that Megan Murphy spoke out against Bill C-16. In early 2017, I went on Tucker Carlson to explain a lawsuit Wolf had filed against the Obama administration. I got a lot of flack for that, but I have no regrets because I think it helped to change things. During this time, things were, thank you. There's no doubt that during this time, things were changing quickly all over the world, most notably, of course, on Turf Island. In 2018, things really kicked off in the UK after the Labour Party announced that it wanted to reform the Gender Recognition Act to remove any criteria for legally changing sex. UK feminists got louder and louder. Magdalene Burns changed the world before dying tragically in 2019. In 2018, Kelly J. Keane made the news for putting up a billboard in Liverpool that said a woman is an adult human female and then being forced to take it down. In 2019, Keene joined up with Wolf and Julia Long and Venice Allen. We all headed to the Capitol. We walked the halls of Congress. We told Democratic lawmakers why they needed to knock it off with the gender identity nonsense, which they obviously have not done. It was also in 2019 that Women's Declaration International launched in New York. And Amy has just reminded me that it was probably also sometime during those 5 years that the event she spoke of took place at the Vancouver Public Library. Everything was heating up. And then came Will Thomas. So stage 4 of the map is social movement takeoff. According to the map, new social movements surprise and shock everyone when they burst into the public spotlight on the evening TV news and in newspaper headlines. Overnight, a previously unrecognized social problem becomes a social issue that everyone is talking about. It starts with a highly publicized, shocking incident, a trigger event, followed by a nonviolent action campaign that includes large rallies and dramatic civil disobedience. Soon these are repeated in local communities around the country. The trigger event is a shocking incident that dramatically reveals a critical social problem to the general public in a new and vivid way, such as the arrest of Rosa Parks for refusing to move to the back of a Montgomery bus in 1955, and other incidents. Trigger events can be deliberate acts by individuals, governments, or the opponents, or they can be accidents. Regardless, by starkly revealing to the public that a social condition and power holder policies blatantly violate widely held, cherished social values, citizen self-interest, and the public trust, the trigger event instills a profound sense of moral outrage in the general populace. Consequently, the general population responds with great passion, demanding an explanation from the power holders and ready to hear more information from the opposition. The trigger event is also a trumpet's call to action for the new wave opposition groups around the country. He's talking here about country because that was the most relevant locus of analysis in 1987 when he was writing. But I would argue that Will Thomas competing in the 2022 NCAA Women's Swimming Championship was the trigger event that launched the movement to protect the sex-based rights of women and girls and to stop the abolition of sex into stage 4 takeoff mode around the world. Thank you, Will. From there, things have moved with astonishing speed, at least in the US. Moyer describes stage 5 as an identity crisis of powerlessness and stage 6 as majority public support. That's where things get interesting. He says that in stage 5, movement builders lose hope and start to despair. His point is that the power holders seem so strong that success seems impossible and people just burn out. They don't realize they're actually winning. But then comes stage 6, majority public support, and success seems inevitable. What's interesting is that he says it's possible for a movement to leap over stage 5 and move right into stage 6, majority public support, and also that sometimes stages 5 and 6 overlap. I think we kind of did a bit of both. I wrote just in early December of last year about how I thought that's where we were at the time, the overlap of stages 5 and 6. I was somewhat worried about bickering and conflict within the movement, but I also wasn't too concerned that those problems would harm the movement overall too much. I think I was right, because I think we can now say with absolute confidence that we're firmly in stage 6, majority public support. There's just no doubt about it. Several weeks ago, I wrote in an outlet called The Liberal Patriot, which has been very slow to talk about this issue. But I was talking about how the recent executive orders are in near complete alignment with what the majority of US voters think about men and women's sports and spaces and about trans generally. As many of us know, polling conducted by the New York Times in January 2025 shows that American voters are overwhelmingly in alignment with what the new order, the original one, the January 20th one, with what it accomplishes. When asked which of 3 possible approaches comes closest to their feelings about the way our society deals with transgender people, roughly half of all voters think society has gone too far, compared to about 1/5 who feel society has not gone far enough. Even more striking, when asked the following, thinking about transgender female athletes, I hope you know I would never use that language. Thinking about transgender female athletes, meaning athletes who were born male at birth but currently identify as female, do you think they should or should not be allowed to compete in women's sports? So to that question, 79% of all voters, including 67% of Democrats and 64% of independents, think that they should not. This research is also consistent with polling conducted in November 2023 on behalf of WDI USA. That survey reflected a strong consensus in favor of female-only spaces and services. For example, 83% of respondents, including 76% of Democrats, agreed that female inmates should share cells only with fellow female prisoners. 85% of respondents, including 74% of Democrats, agreed that a female airline passenger should be patted down by a female TSA officer only. On question after question, the vast majority of Americans, including large percentages of the Democrats themselves, reject the positions the Democratic Party and its politicians have chosen to promote with such zeal in recent years. So this is all reflected in the statements of a woman I encountered at the Supreme Court in December while the court was holding oral arguments in a case called US versus Skermetti. All the way back in 2019, a bunch of us, including this particular woman, held a rally outside the Supreme Court during oral arguments in a case called Bostock versus Clayton County. At that time, the rally participants were a tiny handful of radical feminists and a slew of conservatives. The rally in December was different, this past December. The woman I'm speaking of also served on the board of Women's Liberation Front, and our terms overlapped. But at some point, she kind of dropped out of the movement to focus on personal and family matters. She was there at the rally in December. I approached her to say hello and ask how she was doing. She marveled at the rally participants and said it felt so refreshingly different than it felt in 2019. I asked what she meant, and she remarked on the viewpoint diversity of the crowd. There were radical feminists and conservatives, of course, but there were also gay rights activists that held signs that said, "Stop transing gay kids," and people who held signs that said things like, "Democrats against puberty blockers." She couldn't believe it. So it's now clear that, at least in the US, the movement to protect the sex-based rights of women and girls and to stop the abolition of sex has gone mainstream, which I think is exactly what Amy said in her speech. We're no longer just shouting into the wind. Women on the left have spent years warning Democratic Party leaders of what was coming in November 2024 if they didn't reverse course on this topic. I published my book, The Reckoning: How the Democrats and the Left Betrayed Women and Girls, in November 2023, in part for this purpose. Needless to say, the Democrats did not change course. And as predicted, this turn away from common sense on trans cost them votes in November. We all know about the Kamala Harris is for they, them, President Trump is for you ads. I was watching TV when one of those ads came on, and I nearly fell out of my chair. I thought it was brilliant. I knew it was over, and it was. So we're not out of the woods yet, as we all know, and there's plenty of work to do. Just on that topic, let me go off script for a minute to say that the executive orders are great, and I'm happy that everyone loves them, and I love them, and they're fantastic. They're also just statements of policy. So as good as they are, they need to be enforced. And I'm confident that the Department of Education will enforce them going forward. But if you're confused about why you still see men and boys participating in sports meant for women and girls in the US, it's because the department just needs to take action to enforce those orders. So as great as they are, they're just policy statements. Okay, there's plenty of work to do. We have not reached MAP stage 7, which is success. I will not be satisfied until we reach that stage and until the entire establishment left is held to account for what they've done to sacrifice women and girls and material reality at the altar of trans. But the MAP doesn't maintain that majority support is synonymous with success. Majority support, which is where I think we are now, is the step before success. According to the map, stage 7 begins when the long process of building opposition reaches a new plateau in which the new social consensus turns the tide of power against the power holders and begins an endgame process leading to the movement's eventual success. That's what I want. I want to turn the tide of power against the power holders, such as the Democratic Party and my former employer, the ACLU. The mainstream legacy media simply can't ignore this forever. I understand that the power holders are likely to memory hole their complicity in it, and I don't like that. But I am now confident that this will break. The only question is how. I want to see a reckoning, and I will keep doing everything in my power to bring it about. For now, I'm content for the movement to have reached majority public support in the US, in Canada, and around the world, and onward we go until we beat the misogynist and authoritarian behemoth of gender identity back under a rock where it belongs. Happy International Women's Day.
This is the quick Q&A part of the event. We've had you guys write down some questions. You've specifically noted who you'd like it to answer, so I will throw it to them. Heather Mason. What percentage of Canadian First Nations women are incarcerated in the Canadian federal penal system?
Does it work? Yes, now it works. Okay, so it's over 50% of Indigenous women like that are incarcerated in our federal prisons. They're disproportionately Indigenous women. But when you go to like different jails throughout Canada, like if you go to like Alberta or other provinces, they're actually higher numbers. So it really depends on the location that you're in Canada. Like if you were to go to Nova Scotia, you would have obviously a lower percentage, right? But it is now over 50% of the female population in prison is Indigenous women. And a high portion of those Indigenous women are actually in maximum security. And they are the ones that are incarcerated with a majority of these men who are transferred to women's prisons because, like I mentioned in my speech, a lot of these men are maximum security prisoners. So not only are we incarcerating all of our Indigenous women, we're incarcerating them with these men.
Okay, thank you. This is a bit of a unique one. A woman just handed this to me. She said that her daughter messaged her this message as the event began today. It's not something we can talk about, Mom. I'm kind of brokenhearted that you're even at this event. To be honest, I hope you find whatever it is that you're looking for. So the mom's question is, how do I respond? Should I respond? Thanks for caWsbar. And I should mention that she just told me her daughter's 41 years old. Who would like to answer that?
I wasn't expecting 41 years old, but I'm really sorry to hear that, whoever submitted this question. And that's, what's that? Okay. Helen, I'm very sorry. What a tricky thing to have to experience. You know, it's one thing to lose friends, but when it's causing divisions within your family, that's extremely tough as well. So I would just hope that given some more time and maybe some very patient conversations, and that maybe she will come around.
And is there any chance that she would even watch some of this? Watch one of the speeches from any of the women?
I think the question that I would ask my daughter is, what do you think we were talking about today?
Yeah.
So, I mean, even going back, Ghislaine, thank you for your history of the Quebec.
It was great.
I mean, it's so important.
Yes.
And the suffragettes.
Yes.
I mean, that's how this began. So anyway, there's more questions.
Thank you so much for your question. That's a good one.
Just a little word here, because unfortunately, you're not the only person that I hear with the same story, and close friends happen the same thing with a daughter around your age. So one of my friend that I find it was a good idea. She tell her daughters, let's stop the discussion and take it 10 years from now. Okay, and as Kara was saying, maybe all the consensus will be reversed. It could be possible. So it's a hope.
That's what we're doing. That's what we're fighting for.
I also highly suggest, I'm sure Heather would second me on this, is asking your daughter to Google Tara D'Souza.
Yeah. Yes. Tara D'Souza. Google that name.
I find the prison thing is a really big conversation and mind changer when you get them to actually look into it and then look into alternatives to what we are doing. Like, it is not necessary to put these men in women's prisons. They can have their own wings, pods, ranges that are tailored, unique to their needs, which are different than women's needs. But I find that the whole prison talk, if you go with them, like go to them with the evidence about who it is that is really transferring into women's prisons and what has been happening to women, I find that there's an easier conversation there, whereas they don't actually stop to think about what the harms are. And you really have to think about this subject when you are debating it or having a conversation about it. But I found that a lot of people in my life have definitely changed their opinion once they are confronted with the prison aspect, but also the shelter aspect as well, right? Like the women's rape shelters and the homeless shelters. When you go to them with the facts, like Maureen was talking about the Perry Sound shelter. Pull up Shane Green's photo.
Pull up his name and
Pull
picture.
up his photo. Google it. Look at him. Do you want to share a bed in a shelter with that convicted pedophile? Like, if they look at his photo, they're going to not agree. They're not going to want to share a bed with him. And then you have a way to start discussing this topic.
Or like Ghislaine said earlier, the cognitive dissonance that they would have to be going through to say, no, that's fine. It's okay, right? Okay, another question from at Turf School. She asks, what can a teacher do in a school district, and that is the whole province of BC, that is completely infected with gender ideology? And just a comment, also a plea to parents, please put pressure on your child's schools regarding gender and sexuality alliance clubs, even in elementary schools, library books, and SOGI, etc. So who would like to talk about what can a teacher do in a school district that is completely infected with gender ideology?
Very important question. And I am in contact with many teachers who, I guess first I want to say it's very important that you're in the school. Don't run away from the school because the kids need you. They need your influence and they need your teaching. Because a lot of the teachers who reach out to me, they're like, I've had enough. I can't deal with this training anymore. I can't deal with the stress. Just like these activist teachers have the ability to push something on the kids, you have the ability to stand in truth, love on the kids, and teach them what they need to know. The second thing I would suggest you do is to pass on your knowledge anonymously to journalists who are going ahead and championing this issue. So that is, I would think, the easiest thing you can do to get that message amplified out to parents. And that could be your form of activism in this area. And it's very effective because we can't be inside of the school systems behind the walls. We need you to feed us that information that really wakes up parents. Like, for example, the kids who were being trained and groomed to participate in a pride parade up in Soup, BC, and no parents knew. That came from an anonymous teacher who had had enough. So those are just two things that I'd like to say.
we'll leave it there. Okay, we'll go on to the next question, which
Yeah,
is,
and Maureen, can I just interject too? I'm right
Yes.
over here. There, we have also, of course, let's not forget our participants on Zoom.
oh, right.
So I've been monitoring that chat. We have
Okay.
one question from Miranda, and it's about the prisons. So Heather will take this one. What can be done or is being done to gather information or statistics so when we bring prisons up in arguments, we can present solid data?
So you need to put in ATIP, so access to information and privacy requests. And then when CSC responds, they're going to redact it, and you're going to have to fight with the office of, it's slipping my mind right now, but you have to fight with them to get it unredacted. But you need to be able to collect the data, information and privacy, yeah. You need to get the data from CSC, and you have to make your ATIPs, you have to send in several. So don't put all your information in one, because they'll be like, sorry, this is too much work, we're not doing it. So make sure that you have all, I know it's crazy. And also on top of that, you have to use their language. So you're going to have to look to see what words they use, because if you use your own language, they're going to tell you that that data doesn't exist. So you need to figure out their language, use their language, and only request one thing at a time. So you're going to have to send in multiple access to information requests. But so you need to gather all that data from CSC. But on top of that, like, you need to also get statements from the women that are inside. Which is difficult because you don't have access to women in prison, right? Unless you are going to be put on their visiting form, get permission to be able to go in to see them. But that means that you either are traveling or you need to live near them. But the biggest thing is fighting with CSC to get that information. But you need to gather all of this information in order to be able to do anything for the women inside. And that takes a very long time, especially when you don't have access to the women inside and you're fighting with the government to get the information that you know that they have.
Well, and you can also follow Heather on Twitter, X, because you have all kinds of information that you've shared over the years with it. So the proof is all there. You just have to kind of look for it.
So for Americans who might be watching, Women's Declaration International USA did some information requests for state departments of corrections. And I want to give two shout outs here. One is KPSS US chapter. The woman who runs that has done a ton of work figuring out on the language issue that Heather mentioned, how to phrase the questions to get the data that you're looking for. Because of course they'll deny that there are men in women's prisons. And of course, Amy Ichikawa at Woman to Woman, who's just doing exceptional work on behalf of incarcerated women in California prisons.
Yep.
I just want to point out what an injustice it is that this information is either not properly collected, as in the case with Correction Services Canada, or is so difficult to access, and that it requires a specific skill set to even be able to make a request for information, that you have to make so many requests. And in a lot of places and provinces, each, for instance, NBC or NDP government had made every single information request $10. So when Heather's saying you have to do multiple, and it costs, it can be hundreds or thousands of dollars to do this. So it's unconscionable that it's so hard to find the truth. And that's, you know, if we didn't have women like Heather, I mean, she was the first in Canada to expose what's happening. It's so heartbreaking to just think of these incarcerated women that are locked away and their stories aren't told. And I think of that at the prison protests that Heather puts on across the country, and which I've done a few of them in Abbotsford, and we're outside of the prison and we're protesting, but you know, it's like you don't even get to see the women who are inside, and it's just such a sad and horrible feeling. And you know, you don't even know if they can hear us or if they know that we're there, and it's it's such a, it enrages me, and it's just such a crime against women. And when Heather said at the end of her speech, we are the ones that have to be the voice for these women, she's so right, is that these are just some of the most marginalized women in the entire country. They literally do not have a voice. So again, like everyone who goes to the protest tomorrow, you are the voice of these women that are rotting away in cells or in homes or cottages or whatever with predatory men. It's awful.
I was just sitting here thinking too, some of you know, but most of you are probably not going to know, but Cincy over there with Gender Dissent, they helped me and Tanya on our steering committee. So I did surveys that I got into the women in prisons across Canada and also women on parole throughout Canada, and asked them what their experiences were like inside and to give additional information about what's happened to them. And Tanya did the pictures, and Gender Dissent posted them on their website, and it's called the Prison Letters. So if you go onto their website and you look, you can hear some of the stories of the women that are incarcerated in Canada and what they've gone through.
Okay, maybe this will be the last one. We'll see. Okay, so how to respond to the argument that the transgender are people that are oppressed and only want their fair share? That's a good one to end on.
I think that there's two ways to answer that question. One, I used to be a mental health professional for a very long time, and I think it's true that a lot of people who struggle with their identity or gender identity are suffering from mental health things. So I think it's very important that we do have the compassion when we deal with these people. And I try to do that in my reports. I don't know if you've ever seen me interview people who hate my guts or think I'm a transphobe, but I actually try to relate to them. I even had a 45-minute interview with the lovely Linda Blade opposite of Morgan Ogier.
Yes, that was something.
And to put that into perspective, that was about 2 years in the making of me being calm, patient, and really trying to understand people on the other side. So I think that's the first question or answer to the question. The second is just when they are using it as a tool of victimhood, or when you know that it is being used for reasons other than what I just pointed out, it's simply standing in the truth that we all know and doing so firmly. There's something about the truth and people who stand into it that is very attractive, and it's also addicting. And when people see it again more than once, others will start to do the same. And you guys are all seeing this online. Now when you post stuff, you're getting more hearts and more likes than you ever did before. People are emboldened to take up this issue now like they've never been before. So keep up the good work.
Yeah, great answer. Great answer.
So I just think it's incredibly important to keep explaining to people who are sincerely confused that there are people with differences of sexual development. That is a legitimate medical issue. And it's important for those people to have access to the information that they need, that if they're minors, their parents need, their doctors need to take care of affiliated health and medical issues that come with having a difference of sexual development. That has absolutely nothing to do with Will Thomas, right? But I think people are still very confused about that. And the people who are not confused about it are using it, and they're using it increasingly as this whole thing starts to fall apart. They're using the fact that some people have differences of sexual development to justify the lies of so-called gender identity. So for people who are sincerely curious and want to dig into this stuff, I just think it's really important to talk about that.
No.